Can you explain a bit more about that, please? Thoughts jumping between heads and microbes altering our moods.
Yeah. I mean, as we talked about before, we intuitively feel that we're kind of these independent, atomized entities. But when you look at, say, the physical science, we, I mean, firstly, our bodies are made of molecules, which are actually parts of, they were part of other plants and animals. And, inside our body, there are 40 kilograms of oxygen. And that oxygen was, before it was in our bodies, was spread around the atmosphere, in the earth, in the oceans. It was inside dinosaurs and plants and trees. Just to kind of give you a thought experiment about, how those molecules would have been spread out. If you imagine those 40 kilograms of oxygen right now, they're quite, densely held together with they're in water, so there's strong kind of intermolecular bonds holding our bodies. That's why we don't all float around, even though we're full of oxygen. But when we die and we're whether cremated or, those oxygen molecules will burst out. They'll spread amongst the atmosphere. You can imagine them spreading around the entire Earth, a line 100 kilometers high in the atmosphere. And those molecules spread around the entire Earth. If they were equally spread, how far apart do you reckon the average oxygen molecule would be that was once in your body?
I don't know, like sort of, if they have to go around the whole world, like, I don't know, 20 mile, 50 mile.
Smaller, it's a bit smaller than that. So it turns out there would be zero 0.3 millimeters apart. So in a meter cubed, and
If they went around the whole world.
in the whole world, you'd take a meter cubed from a kilometer above Russia, of Moscow, and you take a meter cubed, there'd be 29 million molecules of oxygen that were once in your body. So that's a dense fog of molecules, and that's mingling with a dense fog of molecules that were once part of other, every dinosaur that's ever lived, every plant, every, shark, hedgehog, walrus, it's all mixed in there. So when you take a breath, you're breathing in that zoological legacy.
All right, zoological legacy. That's a nice bit of language.
Yeah, I guess you're also breathing in bacteria, because on our body, actually, most of our body is, in terms of number of cells, is bacteria. We have about 38 trillion bacterial cells in our body to 37 trillion human cells. So they slightly outnumber us. But they're also inside our human cells. We have these mitochondria. They're the powerhouses of the cells. They produce the energy that we move around. They were just originally single-celled bacteria that got engulfed by a bigger cell that became multicellular organisms that evolved into humans. So even inside each one of our cells, like little Russian dolls, are kind of microorganisms, bacteria. So we're a kind of chimera of the human and the non-human. And those bacteria in our guts, there's a lot of stuff, you read about how they can affect our moods and our emotions, again detracting from our supposed autonomy, because the way we act can be affected by how our gut bacteria are kind of treating us today. But in addition to that, they're on our skin, in our mouths. There's about 1,000 different bacterial species. Behind our ears, there's about 150 different species. So they're all over us. And when you brush your skin like that, they fly off into the air. So actually around you, we shed about 1 million microscopic particles every hour. And you can sample that, and it contains a distinct signature of you. So if you use sophisticated processing of what DNA is in there, and it's your own kind of signature, like a cloud surrounding you, like an aura, I suppose. But when you breathe in next to someone, you're breathing in their cloud. So we're constantly transferring molecules between us. And actually, a lot of the cells in our body, they're only with us for a few weeks. Then new cells form. So we're continually turning over. So then, okay, right, so our physical bodies they don't define us. But what about DNA? That's the instructions that build the body. Maybe that's us. But actually that's, borrowed from our ancestors. We'll pass it on to our ancestors to come. I mean, even viruses sometimes carry DNA between humans. So, the tree of life is actually like a dense, tangled, network, because of these viruses pulling the different limbs together. So physically, the science sort of says, we're not individuals. But then, okay, well, psychologically, maybe we are. And I guess that's where the psychology comes into it, which I can expand on. But
No, go on. No, I was going to say about the thoughts, actually. My next question was, you've explained now like how the microbial effect of consciousness and mood and stuff, and I was going to say about the thoughts bit.
Yeah, I guess because then, okay, so yeah, maybe it's our minds that kind of defines me. That surely that's me. But actually, yeah, every touch from someone, every word, every pheromone, the smells, the molecules that we get from people influences our brains. We have billions of neurons in our heads, and they're changing every second, and they're influenced by every word that we hear, everything we smell. So we're not even the same person that we were when we woke up this morning. We're always changing. So even as I talk to you now, we're kind of changing each other's brains and interacting with each other like that. Our minds are porous, and we have these ideas, these cultural ideas that for example, like inventors, they're great, they're lone geniuses out there kind of beavering away in their labs. But actually, a lot of these inventions are almost kind of ready to be birthed. They're kind of a product of well, standing on the shoulder of giants, I guess, is a cliche, but it's actually true. Lots of inventions like the thermometer, incandescent light bulb, steamboat, hypodermic needle, they're all invented by multiple people at the same time. Sometimes patents filed on exactly the same day in different places. So, these inventors weren't necessarily, obviously they're bright women and men, but actually they're often taking the almost inevitable next step in a series of kind of interdependent innovations. And this creativity, it's part of a great linked, sort of human endeavor, I guess.
Yeah, where does it come from? You ask, perhaps our sort of intuitive reaction to genius, whether it's in sport or art or science, there's this sense of awe of how did someone do that? How do you do that? There's a sense that it's beyond the individual. I heard some time ago that we should regard ourselves more as an event than an object. Do you think it's possible, plausible, likely that we narrativize our reality due to the sort of nature of our perspective, like we operate on a limited bandwidth of consciousness, and that perhaps there are comparable, distinct, higher, or at least different levels of consciousness, perhaps at the level of this sort of microbial reality that you describe floating in dense cubic clouds above Russia, that could be attuned to, could be subjectively experienced. Do you like to get into that kind of gear?
I mean, I think that there's definitely a lot we don't know about the world, for sure. And I think, like you said, in terms of we can. Did you say? I think you said about kind of nouns. I guess whether objects are true or whether things are events or actually dynamic processes. And I think that's absolutely true. And if you really look at it carefully, there is no such thing as an object like a noun. It's actually a shorthand, and it's a useful shorthand because I mean, imagine trying to sort of. I think in a book I give an example. If you were like you own a field or something, and you've got an assistant, and you ask them to go and cut the meadow. You say meadow because it's a kind of useful shorthand. But if we were trying to articulate that in its full complexity, you'd be saying, well, can you go and mow that area which is in a process of change, and the soil microbes are becoming dynamic, and there's gas fluxes, and there's pollinators which are made up of DNA which is connected to the rest of the world.
I can't do this job anymore. I just wanted to work on a farm. You're complicating everything.
yeah. So you lose your assistant. So we kind of need that shorthand. But actually, those shorthands can become a bit dangerous if we believe them.
They become our reality. The signifier becomes the signified. I have the great privilege of living near the River Thames. I was on the river some time ago. There's a weeping willow tree. Me and my wife went under it on a paddleboard and hung out. We didn't do nothing erotic. We were just hanging out. But like when a boat would go by, the ripples come along and they move the little paddleboard that we were on. I was holding onto a branch to keep us there underneath it. And I said that I imagine that if you had sensory instruments sensitive enough, that the waves that we can experience when we are in water would be measurable when someone comes into a room and you are affected by it. And based on what you're saying about pheromones and microbial information, that this is true, that like it's like, oh, I don't feel cool when that person comes in, like it's not entirely a construct as materialists in the current zenith of understanding would have us believe, but that there is the possibility that we are like, that ain't good, something negative just happened. And where do you say you feel these things? In your gut, in your heart, where there are indeed, as I understand, neurological cells and processes that could be called intuition taking place.
Definitely, yeah. There's a lot of processes that go on behind our consciousness that that we're not aware of, and I mean, there's experiments, for example, where dentists making mistakes. If you wear, don't do this, by the way, if you wear a t-shirt to the dentist that you've had some fearsome event happen to you, you jumped out of an aeroplane, and then the kind of fear pheromones are on the t-shirt, and then you go to the dentist is more likely to make a mistake, because those pheromones kind of essentially affect them, and it's an alarm pheromone. So yeah, it's just a life lesson about going.
How was this study conducted in a double-blind format? Right, we're going to need a couple of hundred dentists, we're going to need some skydivers, and some very smelly t-shirts.
Yeah, there's actually a couple of weird experiments like that. One was they got the skydivers, and then they get the sweat from the t-shirts.
They did do it.
They got sweat from people who had been exercising but not in a kind of fearful situation, and then they aerosolize it, and then they squirt it up people's noses, and then it smells mildly sweaty. Both treatments smell the same, but one have kind of got the fear factor in, and it does affect it affects the way they behave. So these kind of hidden things are happening all the time, and clever scientific experiments can start to reveal them, but that's like a needle in a haystack. There could be many more factors happening that we don't know about yet in the way we're responding.